Welcome to the second module of the subject. Let's talk about the role of assessment in instructional decisions. This module deals with the roles of assessment in the instructional decisions made by the teacher to improve the overall teaching and learning process. This module will also define the different types of assessment used in instruction, as well as discuss the function and utilization of each assessment. At the end of this module, outcomes-based assessments are provided to determine the student's learning. We discussed on the past video how important assessment is in considering inside the classroom to have an effective teaching and learning process. Now let's talk about or focus on how are we going to use the assessment in instructional decisions. So before we use different techniques, strategies, or even resources, so let's think about what would be the best. Kasi sabi nga nila, there's no best technique or strategy that we as a teacher will use because it always depends dun sa situation kung ano ba talaga, ay maghalaga na merong assessment para alam mo, di ba? If it's storytelling, maganda ba yun na it would be more on reading activities or mas maganda yung may pinapanood sila? You have to check or assess din talaga on what type of learners that you are dealing with. If they are into visual learner or audio learner, or they wanted to act it, or sila yung mga students who wanted to perform for them to learn. Plans for assessment should be made during the planning for instruction to fully integrate it. By using so, teachers may use it as basis for the decisions that needs to be made from the beginning of the instruction until the end of it. Having carefully planned assessment procedures improves effectiveness of decisions by providing more objective information on which to base judgments. Teachers need to make decisions at the beginning of the instruction, during instruction, and at the end of the instruction. So can you imagine, guys, how flexible a teacher should be and how important doing assessment before, during, and even after, diba? Kasi dun sa past discussion natin, yung assessment could be assessment of learning. You use assessment para matuto yung isang bata or ikaw as a teacher. You use assessment for learning. So dito yun sa beginning of instruction, assessment for learning. So most of the times you will provide pre-test or ito yung mga diagnostic tests para ma-check mo kung yung preparedness ng bata for the subject or for the lesson na i-discuss mo. So imagine without assessment or doing assessment, diba? Parang you will be frustrated as a teacher na you'll be focusing dun sa lesson plan na ginawa mo kasi dun sa objectives you're following yung sa K-12, which is tama naman talaga na dapat i-follow mo yun kasi kailangan yun during national achievement test kung may natutunan ba talaga yung bata or those specific knowledge or information ay na-master na nila. But that's the power of assessment. Bago ka kasi makapag-start dun sa lesson, di ba? Before the lesson, you will know if the student already mastered the basic na information or hindi pa. So, kailangan ka ngayon mag-adjust. Kaya dito, you use assessment before, mahalaga yung assessment for the instructional decision. Okay? And then, for during instruction, you'll check if the students are really learning or hindi naman sila nakikinig or wala lang, 'di ba? So dito mo kasi alam nyo, pag ang teacher kasi once you master the skill of teaching, tapos ma-master nyo tong paggamit ng assessment during instruction, you will realize na Ay, ganun pala yun. There are lots of factors na dapat in-consider pag nade-discuss ka. Hindi lang sa mastery mo ng subject, but also even the students. You have to check them if they follow you or not. Kasi 'di ba, the students will not master, dapat talaga they master the lessons A, B, C before you jump to the next discussion. Baka naman kasi sa sobrang master mo sa subject matter, you forgot to assess that students were not able to master A, B, C. Tapos umabot ka na ng X, Y, and Z, diba? Yung akala mo, fulfill ka for the job or for the mission that you're doing. But without doing assessment, guys, during instruction, everything will goes to nothing. So, parang mawawala ng lahat. Kasi, not just during this discussion or instruction or beginning of this instruction, but also at the end of instruction. So, malalaman mo doon na ito yung sa banda sa dulo kung may natutunan yung bata, di ba? But without doing it during the discussion, di ba, ang daming time na nasayang. Assessment at the beginning of instruction. So, dito yung mga placement test or the diagnostic test. But let's focus first dun sa placement tests. Before proceeding with the instruction, the teacher should know the extent in which the students have already achieved the learning outcomes of the planned instruction. Information about this is answered by placement test. This might be the same test that is given at the end of the instruction. However, this is given in another form. By giving placement test, the teacher is determining whether the students have already mastered some of the material that has been planned to be included in the instruction. If the students have already mastered some of the materials, then the teacher might need to modify the teaching plan. So, you could really see, diba, yung assessment before the instruction in this placement test ay very effective para mas mabilis yung mastery skills ng bata. That's why there's always a review bago mag-start para alam mo kung saan ka talaga magfo-focus or kung saan yung bibigay mo yung most of the time na ima-master. No need for you to keep on repeating such basic information kung sobrang na-master na ng bata, di ba? So, dun ka naman mag-focus sa latter part na mga objectives mo. Okay, when you give a placement assessment to determine entry of performance, so, dalawang lang yan, aalamin mo. The readiness concern, if the students have the prerequisite skills, kung ready na ba sila. Diba sa macro skills, hindi mo matuturuan yung bata kung paano sulat unless they know how to read. Kasi ang reading, yun yung receptive skills. Tapos, yung productive skills ay yun yung sa writing. And then, the other concern is yung placement concern. Have the students already achieved the intended learning outcomes? So, yung learning, for example, you have 4 learning outcomes for the topic. If the first objective is already na-reach na or na-master na ng students, that's a good thing. And then you can go to the next objective. So, if the readiness concern, pag hindi sila ready, provide readiness experience. So, provide more review and discussion para mabilis na lang sa kanila na intindihin yung next na lesson or topic. If yes, proceed with the planned instruction. So, tama yung ginawa mo na lesson plan or yung plano mo. And then, pag placement concern naman, kung hindi nila na-achieve yun, then proceed with the plan instruction. But if it's not, advance the students to a higher level. Kaya maganda. But you know what, guys? To be honest with you, dito tayo nahihirapan. I had this experience before with my grade 1 pupils. Merong isang estudyante na sobrang talino talaga, ang bilis niyang cope up. Alam mo yung master na niya yung mga basic na skills. And then, I could see na naboboring siya sa classroom, sa mga activities kasi sobrang easy lang sa kanya. So, what I did is provide the student more activities. Kasi, di ba, di naman pwede kasi yun na porket halos yung students, 99% of them, were not able to master yung mga basic skills, ay iiwan mo na yung isa. Lalo na yung isang yun ay alam mo yung may potential talaga. So, we as a teacher should provide intervention dun sa students na yun na para may matutunan pa rin siya. Kasi we have to respect and consider each student. So, di ba pag hayaan mo lang siya na ganun, anong matutunan niya ngayon? Even if na-perfect niya yung assessment at the end of the lesson or at the end of the instruction, do you think it's learning for him? Do you think that student enjoy? So, nagpo-provide ka din talaga ng intervention para may matutunan siya. Kaya ina-advance ko siya mostly sa mga activities and even dun sa topic. And I even alam mo yon, dapat tinutulungan mo siya not just inside the classroom but also even sabihin nyo dun sa administrator or even the guidance counselor or what we could do to the students. So, we could provide them intervention na, alam mo yon, mapunta siya sa next level na year. Okay? Now, let's talk about assessment during instruction, the formative and diagnostic test. So guys, just want to let you know about my mistake. Earlier, I said that it's yung diagnostic ay part ng before instruction. So I correct myself, yung diagnostic test ay during instruction pala. Yung placement test talaga yung sa before instruction. So during instructional program, the main concern is with the learning progress made by the students. This time, the teacher must determine which learning tasks show satisfactory progress among the students and which ones do they need help, and which students are having such severe learning problem and need remedial work. Sometimes, yung napiprepare kasi nating lessons, diba, sa lesson plan, sobrang ganda na ng flow na pwedeng mangyari. But in reality, kung nagtuturo na talaga, once you check na yung bata masyadong nahirapan dito sa first objective or sa learning outcome na gusto mong mangyari, so hahaba at kakainin talaga yung oras. But what makes it helpful or advantageous din talaga siya, nagkaroon ka ng ganyong assessment tapos kino-consider mo pa kasi mas lalong maganda yung kalalabasan. And then, malalaman mo din kung ano ba, saan ba sila nagka-problema na field or na topic. For formative tests, these are tests used to monitor student also during instruction. These are designed to measure the extent to which students have mastered the learning outcomes of a rather limited segment of instruction, such as a unit or textbook chapter. These tests are similar to quizzes, unit tests that teachers have traditionally used, but they place greater emphasis on. Kaya every discussion talaga pagkatapos or during the instruction, maganda yung merong formative test para makikita mo kung saan yung nahihirapan yung bata. So, paano mo nalaman kung saan nahihirapan yung bata? Lalo na pag sa diba, it's combination na lang lahat ng learning outcomes mo. Malalaman natin yon by checking the difficulty level ng each number. So, halimbawa sa 20 na bata, 5 lang yung nakasagot doon, then divided by the total number multiplied by 100. So, yung percentage na lalabas doon or kung ilang percent yung level ng difficulty. So, pag maraming masyadong mababa o hindi nakasagot, kailangan mo talagang ituro ulit yung topic or lesson. Ganito kahalaga ang pagkakaroon ng assessment during instruction. It's to measure all the intended outcomes of the unit of instruction using the results to improve learning rather than to assign grades. So you could not easily assign the grade of the student if it's during the instruction, diba? Kailangan you use it for learning para ma-develop mo yung natutunan ng bata. And the purpose is to identify the student's learning success and failures so that adjustments in instruction and learning can be made. When the majority of the students fail a test item or set of items, the material is typically retaught in a group setting. When a minority of students experience learning failures, alternate methods of study are usually prescribed for each student. So, halimbawa dito is yung reading assignment in the second book or computer instruction and visual aids. These corrective prescriptions are frequently keyed to each item or to each set of items designed to measure a separate learning test so that the students can begin immediately after testing to their individual learning errors. So, they have to check if what type of learning or prescribed method na gagamitin nila. The power of providing alternate methods of study that we will prescribe to the student is also a helpful practice kasi they will test their individual learning errors. The best thing in providing alternate methods of study for the students is they could immediately test themselves about their individual learning errors. So, nagkakaroon sila ng, alam mo yon yung pakiramdam na natitest nila or na-assess din nila yung sarili nila na dapat pala talaga na sa assessment na to or sa activity na to, dapat mas natututo pala ako if it's more on visual, may nakikita akong drawing, or I could learn more if I just listen, diba? Hindi lang pure reading talaga. Diba kung napanood nyo yung sa Every Child Special, yun na naman yung example ko. So si Ishan, diba, kahit anong gawin ng mga teachers sa kanya, kahit pagalitan na siya, or even if repetitive na yung pagtuturo, hindi talaga siya natututo. Kasi, hindi yun yung way ng learning niya or hindi yun talaga yung best method or technique ng teaching kung saan matututo siya. And after assessing nga, nung best teacher niya, he found out na kailangan talaga turuan pala yung bata through art or dapat ginagawa niya kasi because of his dyslexia nga naman, diba? Ang hirap talaga turuan pag may ganong disorder or problem sa learning. So, the same lang din sa when you become a future teacher na may mga bata na kahit anong turo natin, hindi natututo, we have to consider na maybe that child or that student has a special skill na doon mo siya hatakin. Yung alam mo yun, mag-focus ka sa strength ng bata. And focusing on that could influence him or mas naging motivated siya or mas nagiging confident siya sa sarili niya. In that way, mas mapapadali yung learning. That's really the power of considering yung differences and uniqueness ng isang bata. Kaya mahalaga na i-assess nyo siya during instruction. Hindi yun pwede na grades ka na agad. Ganto, hindi naman talaga marunong, bagsak na to, or whatsoever, di ba? Dapat, i-assess muna natin and help the student. The formative assessment using performance-based tasks may involve periodic assessment of a product, writing sample or drawing, or a process, giving speech, operating a machine, with feedback to students concerning strengths and weaknesses. The aim here, as with formative testing, is to monitor learning progress and to provide corrective prescriptions to improve learning. When a student's learning problems are so persistent that they cannot be resolved by corrective prescriptions of formative assessment, a more intensive study of the student's learning difficulties is called for. It is here that diagnostic assessment is useful. The diagnostic assessment focuses on the common sources of error encountered by students so that the learning difficulties can be pinpointed and remediated. Okay? Doon talaga masusukat yung patience ng isang teacher. You're not working for you to get the salary, but for the students learning. This type of students with disorders or learning problems really need to be focused on and provide remediation. Kaya hindi lang sa teacher talaga, na lahat sa teacher, na porket di marunong magbasa and then you do your best. Hindi yun pwede na nag-give up ka na lang, sasabihin mo na, ano ba yan? Wala ba akong kwentang teacher? Bakit ganito yung estudyante ko? Hindi naman natututo. Please remember that there's a guidance counselor in our school na pwedeng mag-guide sa atin, lalo na sa emotional needs or problems ng students. Kasi if we have 50 students, tapos mag-focus ka dun sa isa na may problema sa learning, kawawa naman yung 49 students, di ba? And di porket nag-iisa lang siyang estudyante may problema, ay yung tipong kakalimutan na, hayaan na lang. We could ask some intervention from the right person. Diagnostic assessment can frequently be aided by the use of diagnostic tests. These tests typically include a relatively large number of test items in each specific area with slight variations from one set of items to the next so that the cause of specific learning errors can be identified. In detecting errors in the addition of whole numbers, for example, we might construct a test that includes a set of items requiring no carrying, a set that requires simple carrying, and one that requires repeated carrying to determine if carrying is the source of difficulty. Unfortunately, diagnostic tests are difficult to construct in most areas of instruction. Therefore, we must depend more heavily on observation and judgment. Indeed, diagnostic assessment are difficult to construct since you cannot easily diagnose, di ba? Hindi mo naman diagnose kung may problema talaga sa learning ng bata if by just looking at it, by just focusing dun sa variable na nakatulala ng yung bata or hindi nakinig or hindi nakasagot, ibig ba sabihin nun, wala na talagang learning yung bata. Hindi mo siya magdadiagnose, but you could rely on observation and judgment. So it should be a series of behavior or actions na pinapakita ng bata. Kaya mahirap talaga yung sa diagnostic. So we have here for the formative assessment, para makita mo yung progress ng learning nila. There's only one question for you to answer. Are the students achieving the learning outcomes? Kung nakikita mo yung progress na nakakasunod sila, or they're achieving it, if it's no, provide group or individual remediation. You know what? I'm so happy na dun sa research na ginawa ko nga, aside from checking yung correlation na academic performance and the social media platform na ginamit ng bata, I found out na most of the students in our school ay mas effective yung learning nila when they do it collaboratively. So, even most of the studies or researches na ginawa, mas maganda yung learning bata talaga pag by group. Bakit kaya? So, there are lots of reasons for it. Kaya dito malalaman talaga kung maganda na merong formative assessment kasi nakikita mo na nakakasunod ba yung bata or hindi. Pag individual, hindi talaga siya masyado nakakasunod, then you could try yung sa group. Kasi, di ba, pag group, tumataas yung confidence nila, and then they have sharing of ideas, and then they could easily express their emotion, their opinions. And then, if it's a yes, kung nakasunod naman sila, then it's a go for you. Provide feedback to reinforce learning. So, how important it is of giving feedback to the students. Siyempre, di ba, parang ano lang yan, most of the people or all the people wanted to be appreciated. Lahat ng tao gustong ma-appreciate, lalo na yung mga effort na ginagawa nila. For students, giving feedback is heartwarming for them. Kasi it means may progress sila or si teacher, nakakitaan pala ako na nag-improve na maganda pala yung ginawa namin. So, that's a way of providing a positive classroom. Alam mo yun, nagagamit mo yung technique mo in developing a positive classroom environment. And if it's a yes, then proceed with the plan instruction, of course. Pero pag hindi pa rin natuto yung bata, you can provide diagnostic assessment to study persistent difficulties. Baka kasi may problema na yung bata na kailangan ng focus or alam mo yon, malalim na intervention. Wag niyo sabihin sa sarili niyo kung maging teacher kayo na ako ba yung may problema. Hindi sa lahat na pagkakataon ay problema na ng teacher. We need to consider kasi hindi naman nakakatulong yun when we blame ourselves, diba? So we have to do something. We need to ask for help. Okay? Para sa student. The assessment at the end of the instruction, ito na yung sa summative test. At the end of a course or unit of instruction, teachers are concerned primarily with the extent to which the students have achieved the intended outcomes of the instruction. The teacher must now determine, dito sa summative, which students have mastered the learning task to such a degree that they should proceed to the next course or unit of instruction. And what grade should be assigned to each student. So, dito na yun sa summative test yung sinasabi ko na recorded kasi dito na pumapasok yung you are assigning, alam mo yun, na-check mo na kung nasunod ba nila yung buong unit or yung mga learning task. Achievement assessment at the end of the instruction for the purpose of certifying mastery or assigning grade is called summative assessment. This assessment is typically comprehensive in coverage and includes both test and performance assessments. Although the results are used primarily for grading, there should be some feedback to students and they should be used for evaluation the effectiveness of the instruction. Even if may grade nga yung student, kaya nga diba sa mga cards na binibigay ng school, it's not only the grade na kasama doon, there's also a feedback. And you know what, that's really an interesting thing na ngayon ko lang na-realize when I become a teacher. Kasi before, di ba, parang wala lang sa akin, pag nababasa yung card, nakikita ko doon na pag first grading, ganito, laging ganun yung comment sa akin. Pag first grading, mahiyain, shy type, but willing to learn na student. Then, nung sa second grading, alam mo yun, nagiging cooperative na ako, I participated in the class. Then, nung third grading, nagiging responsible or I can be relied on. And then, nung fourth grading, ayun, congratulations. Kasama sa may awards. So, if you reflect on it, how important yung responsibility ng teacher in giving feedback to the students, because that feedback could be an assessment of learning, diba? Yung of learning, you use that assessment to check who you are alam mo, nakikita mo as a student, ala, ganun pala yun. Ang galing, may improvement pala na nakikita even the teacher, and you could realize it on your own. And that really makes me more confident nung nabasa ko yun. And I will never forget that situation or moment nung nabasa ko yun. And even keep that card dun sa journal ko. Kasi it makes me feel good, and you could see how truly improved you are. For summative assessment, you have to determine the terminal performance. There's only one question for you to answer. Have the student achieved the intended outcomes of instruction? So if not, kung bumagsak sila dun sa exam mo, provide additional learning experiences. So dapat may remediation or remedial lessons na ibibigay mo sa estudyante. And then if it's yes, assign grades or certify mastery. Kaya porket bumagsak yung bata, hindi mo pwedeng bigyan agad ng grades. Nabagsak ka na, ayan, balik ka na. As a teacher, you need to provide learning experiences muna para tulungan mo yung bata na makapasa talaga, 'di ba? Hindi doon sa way na bibigyan ka lang ng gift or pera. It's against the our profession. So kung yung bata naman ay natuto talaga after providing learning experiences, ayun, pwede mo na siyang bigyan ng grade and evaluate the effectiveness of the instruction. Dito, masusukat talaga if all the students dun sa summative assessment mo or sa exam mo ay bumagsak. You have to check or reflect as a teacher, yung ginamit mo bang instruction ay effective. Kasi pag bagsak halos lahat ng students, then your instruction ay hindi effective. So you must be flexible and do some changes. Pumili ka ng best technique or strategy. And you have to work with your student. Dapat i-consider mo din yung differences nila at yung mga problems na na-encounter nila. I'll be providing some activities for you or questions, but you can answer these questions on your own or you can reflect it for you to check your understanding, okay? Thank you so much.